Olivia Morgan's hands trembled as she smoothed the creases of her navy blue dress for the 5th time. The restaurant was far too elegant for her budget. Warm candlelight dancing across polished mahogany tables, soft music weaving through the hum of sophisticated conversation, and servers gliding between tables with practiced grace. She checked her phone again. 7:15 p.m. 15 minutes past their agreed meeting time. She'd spent an hour curling her auburn hair with a borrowed iron that singed her fingers twice, hoping tonight might be different from the string of disappointing dates that peppered her lonely existence. The hostess had given her that look, pity thinly veiled behind professional courtesy, when she'd guided her to a table clearly meant for two. Olivia had ordered only water, explaining that she was waiting for someone, her voice carrying a confidence her racing heart betrayed. Her purse felt impossibly light on her lap, containing just her phone with its cracked screen, a nearly empty lip gloss, and exactly $8.75, just enough for the bus fare home. She hadn't planned on paying. They'd agreed he would treat tonight, his suggestion that had made her push aside her usual caution. At 7:30, she sent another message, fingers hovering over the send button before she pressed it. Still waiting at our table. Traffic? The words seemed to hang in digital limbo before disappearing into unanswered space, making the silence of her phone more deafening with each passing minute. The buzz finally came at 7:45, her heart leaping until she read the words that gutted her. "Lowell, did you actually show up? Was just messing with you. Not worth the Uber." Another message followed instantly. "Can't believe you fell for it. Send pics of your sad dinner for one?" The air seemed to vanish from her lungs as the humiliation washed over her in hot waves. She stared at the screen, willing the words to change, fighting the burn of tears threatening to spill and complete her public mortification. Her spine straightened instinctively, a defense mechanism against collapse, as she folded the pristine napkin on her lap with deliberate precision. She would leave with whatever dignity she could salvage, head high despite the crushing weight in her chest. From 2 tables behind her, a man watched through hooded eyes, his untouched whiskey gathering condensation. He sat alone, impossibly still amid the restaurant's movement, his charcoal suit custom-tailored to his broad shoulders, his presence commanding even in silence. He had noticed her the moment she walked in, the nervous anticipation in her steps, the way she tucked her hair behind her ear when the hostess approached, the determined set of her shoulders as minutes ticked by. Now he saw the light in her eyes extinguish as she read her phone, the slight tremble of her lower lip as she gathered her things. Alexander Blackwood had seen enough liars in his life to recognize genuine pain, and something in her quiet dignity as she prepared to leave unnoticed struck a chord he thought long silenced. His eyes followed her as she rose, noting the careful way she hid her face from other diners. At precisely the moment Olivia stood to make her escape, a server appeared at her table with a steaming plate of handmade pasta and a glass of sparkling wine. "Your dinner, miss," the server announced with a warm smile, loud enough to turn several heads in their direction. "There's been a mistake," Olivia stammered, clutching her purse tighter. I didn't order this." The server's smile remained unwavering as she set down the dishes with practiced precision. "It's been taken care of," the server replied with a knowing glance toward the back of the restaurant. "The gentleman insists it's not charity. Just a reminder that you deserve dinner regardless of who shows up." Olivia froze, suspicion warring with hunger and something deeper, a desperate need to not feel invisible tonight. She sank back into her chair, confusion and gratitude battling behind her eyes as she scanned the room for her mysterious benefactor. He didn't approach immediately, giving her space to decide whether to stay or flee. Alexander watched as she tentatively picked up her fork, her shoulders gradually relaxing as she took the first bite of food she probably couldn't afford otherwise. When he finally approached her table, his movement was fluid and deliberate, like a predator who had long ago mastered the art of appearing harmless. He stopped precisely 2 feet from her chair, keeping a respectful distance that was nevertheless close enough for her to notice the intensity of his gaze. "You should finish your meal," he said, his voice low and surprisingly gentle for a man whose presence commanded such attention. "The chef here takes pride in his work." His eyes met hers, clear and unflinching. Olivia studied him, wariness evident in the set of her shoulders. "Why would you do this for a stranger?" she asked, her voice steadier than she felt, one hand still gripping her fork as if it might offer protection. "Because I recognize dignity when I see it," he answered simply, "and because sometimes the world needs reminding that kindness doesn't always come with conditions." He didn't smile. His expression remained serious, almost solemn. Heat rose to her cheeks as she absorbed his words. the unexpected kindness more disarming than any charm or flattery might have been. "Thank you," she managed, the words feeling inadequate against the weight of his gesture. Alexander gave a barely perceptible nod, then turned to leave without asking her name or number. No strings attached, just as he'd implied, a rarity Olivia couldn't remember experiencing before. "Wait," she called, surprising herself with her boldness. "Won't you join me?" The invitation hung between them, fragile but sincere. "It seems wrong to eat alone when there's clearly enough for two." Alexander hesitated, something flickering behind his composed exterior, perhaps surprise that she would want his company, or perhaps calculation of risks she couldn't begin to understand. Finally, with a deliberate shift of his shoulders, he pulled out the chair across from her. 3 days later, Olivia hurried into her favorite coffee shop near the university campus, her nursing textbooks heavy in her worn backpack. The small cafe offered free Wi-Fi and didn't mind if students lingered for hours over a single cup of coffee, perfect for her tight budget. She counted out exact change for a plain black coffee, tucking her last dollar back into her wallet before scanning the crowded space for an empty table. The barista returned moments later with 2 cups instead of 1, nodding toward the corner of the room with a curious smile. Olivia turned, her breath catching when she spotted him. Alexander, sitting alone at a corner table, laptop open but his attention fixed on her. Gone was the formal suit, replaced by a crisp button-down with rolled sleeves that revealed strong forearms and a simple watch that probably cost more than her semester's tuition. "You remembered my coffee order," she said as she approached his table, surprise evident in her voice. The plain black coffee seemed too ordinary for a man who had ordered her a gourmet meal days before. "I remembered your resilience," he replied, gesturing to the empty chair across from him. The coffee was the easy part. There was something in his steady gaze that made her feel seen in a way that was both unsettling and exhilarating. They spoke cautiously at first, like dancers learning unfamiliar steps, Olivia sharing bits about her nursing program, late nights at the library, the impossible balance of work and study. Alexander listened with unexpected intensity, asking questions that showed genuine interest rather than polite obligation. When she asked about his work, he offered only edges of truth. Import business, mostly, sometimes consulting for restaurants like the one where we met. His slight smile suggested there was more beneath the surface, but Olivia didn't press. Their conversation shifted to books they'd read, films they'd seen, places they hoped to visit, neutral territory that still revealed the contours of their minds. Olivia found herself laughing, the sound surprising her with its authenticity after weeks of forced smiles. 2 hours passed before Olivia noticed the time, her next class looming. She gathered her books, expecting Alexander to ask for her number or suggest another meeting, but he simply smiled and wished her luck on her pharmacology exam. As she reached the door, her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Charity gala this Saturday at the Westmore Hotel. Medical research funding. Thought it might interest you. No pressure." No signature needed. She knew exactly who it was from. The gala invitation felt both thrilling and concerning. How had he gotten her number? And why this specific event that aligned so perfectly with her studies? Part of her wanted to decline, to retreat from the intensity of his attention, yet her fingers were already typing an acceptance. That Saturday, Olivia stood before her apartment mirror, hardly recognizing herself in the borrowed cocktail dress, emerald green silk that her roommate insisted brought out her eyes. She'd searched online about the gala, confirming it was legitimate, prestigious, and far beyond her usual social circle. The Westmore Hotel ballroom glittered with crystal chandeliers and the polished smiles of Boston's elite. Olivia clutched her small purse, feeling like an imposter until Alexander appeared at her side, his presence both reassuring and commanding. "You look like you belong here," he murmured, guiding her through the crowd with a light hand at the small of her back. "Because you do." The certainty in his voice made her stand taller, chin lifted as they navigated toward the medical research displays. Olivia surprised herself by engaging confidently with researchers, asking insightful questions about their work in pediatric medicine. Alexander watched from a slight distance, something like pride flickering across his usually guarded features. The evening flowed with unexpected ease until a commotion near the entrance drew murmurs from the crowd. 3 men in expensive suits entered, their presence immediately changing the atmosphere. Conversations halted, glances darted nervously in their direction. Alexander's posture shifted instantly, his body subtly angling between Olivia and the newcomers. "We should step onto the terrace," he said, his voice calm, but leaving no room for question as he steered her toward glass doors leading outside. From the relative safety of the shadowed terrace, Olivia watched the tallest of the three men scan the room until his eyes locked with Alexander's. A silent exchange passed between them, loaded with history and threat, that made her skin prickle with unease. "Who is that?" she whispered, her fingers unconsciously tightening around Alexander's forearm. The coolness of the night air couldn't explain the chill that had settled into her bones at witnessing their wordless confrontation. "James Calloway," Alexander replied, his voice dropping to a register she hadn't heard before. "We have competing interests in the city." The deliberate vagueness of his explanation told her more than any details could have. The pieces clicked into place with sudden clarity. The restaurant where they'd met wasn't just expensive. It was known for certain clientele. His import business explained the deference shown by hotel staff. The way he constantly scanned rooms wasn't paranoia, but necessity. "You're not just a businessman," Olivia stated, rather than asked, her voice steadier than she expected. She should be afraid, should be making excuses to leave, yet the realization brought a strange calm, as if the world finally made sense. Alexander turned to her fully, shadows playing across his features as he studied her reaction. "Does that change things?" The question carried weight beyond its simple words, offering her a clean exit if she wanted one. Olivia considered the sensible response, the safe choice that would return her to her predictable life of study sessions and budget meals. Instead, she answered truthfully, "It explains things, but doesn't change how I feel when I'm with you." The warning came 3 weeks later as Olivia walked home from her night shift at the university hospital. Alexander's black sedan pulled alongside her, window lowering to reveal not him but one of his men, Marcus, his expression grave in the streetlight's glow. "Miss Morgan, you need to come with me now," Marcus said, eyes scanning the street behind her. "Mr. Blackwood's orders. There's been a development." The urgency in his voice brooked no argument as he stepped out to open the passenger door. Olivia's nursing bag hit the floor of the car as they sped away, Marcus explaining in clipped sentences that Calloway's men had been watching her apartment, tracking her movements, looking for leverage against Alexander after a disputed shipment had been seized. The safe house stood hidden among pine trees an hour outside the city, lights glowing from windows like a welcoming cabin rather than the fortress it truly was. Alexander waited on the porch, his face tight with a mixture of anger and relief when she stepped from the car. "I never wanted this for you," he said after Marcus left them alone in the warmth of the rustic living room. "This wasn't supposed to touch you." The regret in his voice made her reach for his hand, finding it clenched into a fist at his side. Olivia had barely begun to understand the implications when headlights swept across the windows, followed by the crunch of tires on gravel. Alexander moved with fluid precision, pulling her behind him as he reached beneath his jacket. "Stay down," he ordered, voice suddenly hard as steel as 3 of his men appeared from different rooms, weapons ready. The fear Olivia expected to feel was present, but distant, overshadowed by the surreal clarity of the moment. The knock that came was rhythmic, a pattern that made Alexander relax slightly. "Perimeter report," he called, not lowering his guard until a voice responded with what was clearly a coded confirmation that they were secure. Through the night, Olivia learned more about Alexander's world than he had ever willingly shared. The territory disputes with Calloway's organization, the legitimate businesses that served as fronts, the precarious balance of power that kept the peace until now. "I should have walked away after that first night," Alexander said, as dawn broke through the trees. "But I couldn't stop thinking about your courage, sitting there alone, refusing to be broken by cruelty." His hand reached for hers across the kitchen table. Olivia intertwined her fingers with his, understanding now that she stood at a crossroads. "I'm scared," she admitted, "but not of you, of losing the person I've found beneath all of this." The truth of her words surprised them both. The glass shattered before either could respond, followed instantly by the deafening crack of gunfire. Alexander yanked her to the floor, covering her body with his as bullets splintered wood and punctured walls around them. The attack on the safe house lasted 7 agonizing minutes before Alexander's reinforcements arrived, driving back Calloway's men into the forest. The once peaceful cabin now stood riddled with bullet holes, windows shattered, furniture splintered into kindling. Olivia's nursing training took over as she tended to Marcus's shoulder wound, her hands steady despite the adrenaline still coursing through her veins. "How did they find us?" she asked, voice low as she applied pressure to the bleeding. Alexander paced by the broken windows, phone pressed to his ear, issuing rapid commands to men stationed across the city. His face had hardened into something unrecognizable. Gone was the measured businessman, replaced by the tactician, the leader, the hunter. "There's only one explanation," he finally said, sliding his phone into his pocket. "Someone in my organization told Calloway where to find us." The betrayal hung heavy in his words, sharpening the already dangerous edge to his movements. They relocated before dawn to a penthouse apartment overlooking the harbor, the city lights blinking beneath them like fallen stars. The building's security rivaled that of government facilities. Biometric scanners, armed guards, escape routes mapped out in Alexander's mind. Olivia stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows, watching dawn break over the water while Alexander made calls in the next room. The distance between them felt wider than the physical space. He was retreating into his world of shadows, leaving her on the periphery. "I've arranged for you to leave the country," he announced when he returned, not meeting her eyes. "London first, then anywhere you want. You'll have protection, money, a new identity, everything you need to start over away from this." Anger flared in Olivia's chest, hot and unexpected. "So you've decided for me, without asking what I want?" She stepped closer, forcing him to look at her. "That's not protection, Alexander. That's control." His jaw tightened, eyes flashing with frustration. "What I want doesn't matter anymore. Calloway won't stop coming for me, and now he's using you to do it." His voice dropped, revealing the fear beneath his anger. "I can't watch you die because of me." Olivia closed the remaining distance between them, placing her palm against his chest where she could feel his heartbeat. "Then, let me help you find the traitor." The determination in her voice matched his own. "I notice things others miss. It's what makes me a good nurse." Against his better judgment, Alexander agreed, sharing details about his inner circle. 7 men and women who knew the location of the safe house. Each had years of loyalty behind them. Each had access to sensitive information, and one had betrayed everything they'd built. Through careful observation over the next 3 days, Olivia noted inconsistencies in their behavior, particularly in Daniel, Alexander's financial advisor, whose nervous glances and excessive phone checking betrayed his unease when reports of Calloway's movements were discussed. The warehouse by the docks had been Alexander's father's first legitimate purchase, a symbol of their family's transition from street soldiers to business leaders. Now it would serve as the stage for a calculated confrontation decades in the making. Daniel unwittingly led them straight to Calloway, believing he was feeding information about a vulnerable shipment, while Alexander's team tracked his every communication. The trap was set with Olivia as the apparent bait, information only Daniel had access to. "You don't have to be there," Alexander insisted the night before, his hands gentle on her shoulders despite the storm raging in his eyes. "This isn't your fight." But they both knew it had become her fight the moment she chose to stay. The night air hung heavy with fog as they arrived at the warehouse, moisture collecting on metal surfaces and obscuring visibility beyond 20 feet. Alexander's men moved like shadows, taking positions throughout the cavernous space, while Olivia remained hidden as planned. Calloway arrived with an entourage of armed men, his silver hair catching what little light filtered through the high windows. "I was beginning to think you'd gone soft, Blackwood," he called out, his voice echoing, "hiding behind a woman instead of facing me directly." Alexander stepped from the shadows, unarmed, his presence alone commanding attention. "There's only one coward here, James. The man who targets civilians instead of handling business properly." His words carried a deadly calm that silenced the warehouse. From her hidden vantage point, Olivia watched Daniel slip through a side door, confirming her suspicions as he approached Calloway's right-hand man with anxious deference. Her heart pounded in her ears as she sent the agreed-upon signal to Alexander's most trusted lieutenant. Calloway's laugh cut through the tension, sharp and dismissive. "Business? Is that what you call stealing my East Harbor contracts?" He gestured casually, and his men raised their weapons in unison. "I call this correcting the market." The first shot came without warning, but not from Calloway's men. Daniel crumpled to the ground, clutching his leg as Alexander's lieutenant emerged from cover, weapon trained steadily on the traitor who'd endangered them all. Chaos erupted as Calloway realized the trap, his men firing blindly into the shadows, while Alexander's team executed their carefully coordinated response. Olivia pressed herself against the metal wall, heart hammering as bullets ricocheted through the warehouse. Alexander moved with lethal precision toward Calloway, evading gunfire with an almost supernatural awareness of his surroundings. When they finally stood face to face, Calloway pressed a gun to Alexander's chest, desperation replacing his earlier confidence. "You think killing me ends this?" Calloway snarled, finger tightening on the trigger. "There will always be someone coming for what you have." The warehouse had gone eerily quiet, the remaining men on both sides frozen in a deadly tableau. In the shadows near the loading bay, 2 of Calloway's men attempted to flank Alexander's position, their footsteps nearly silent on the concrete floor. Olivia noticed their movement reflected in a broken mirror fragment, her breath catching as she realized no one else had spotted the impending ambush. Without weapons or combat training, she improvised, knocking over a stack of empty metal drums that crashed with deafening resonance throughout the warehouse. The distraction gave Alexander's men the split second they needed to neutralize the threat, their eyes momentarily flickering to Olivia with newfound respect. The warehouse's ancient sprinkler system suddenly activated, triggered by someone's stray bullet hitting the control panel. Cold water rained down, turning the concrete floor slick, and washing blood into spiraling patterns that caught the dim light like macabre art. A visual reminder of the cost this feud had already extracted. Olivia couldn't bear to watch from safety any longer, her decision made in a heartbeat as she stepped from cover, medical bag in hand. "This doesn't have to end with more bloodshed," she called out, her voice steady despite her terror. "Enough people have been hurt." Alexander's face contorted with fear at seeing her exposed, but Olivia continued forward with the quiet determination he'd first noticed in the restaurant. "I'm a nurse," she said, addressing both men. "Let me help the wounded while you two figure out if your pride is worth dying for." The standoff lasted 3 eternal minutes before Calloway lowered his weapon, something in Olivia's unwavering courage cutting through decades of hatred. "Your father would be disappointed, Blackwood," he muttered, stepping back. "He understood this business requires blood." "My father died alone and afraid," Alexander replied, not moving a muscle until Calloway's gun was completely lowered. "I'm not interested in his legacy." The shift in Alexander was subtle, but profound. The first public declaration of a decision made in quiet moments with Olivia. The aftermath unfolded with surprising civility, wounded men from both sides receiving Olivia's care, while Alexander and Calloway retreated to the warehouse office to negotiate terms that would redefine territories and prevent future bloodshed. Dawn broke as they emerged. Agreement reached not through violence, but through recognition of mutual destruction's futility. Olivia watched Alexander shake hands with his oldest enemy, his posture changing subtly as if shedding a weight carried too long. 3 months passed with remarkable tranquility as Alexander restructured his operations, legitimate businesses thriving while shadowy dealings gradually diminished. The transition wasn't without resistance from old guards, but his resolve never wavered. Alexander established a scholarship fund at Olivia's nursing school, anonymously at first, until she convinced him that attaching his name to legitimate philanthropy would accelerate his transition to respected businessman. The ceremony dedicating the new pediatric wing became his first public appearance without bodyguards. The warehouse where the confrontation occurred transformed under Alexander's direction into a community medical center, employing doctors who asked no questions about gunshot wounds or suspicious injuries. Calloway, surprisingly, became an unlikely supporter, directing his own men to protect the facility that served their shared territories. Olivia's former date, the one who stood her up that fateful night, approached her on campus months later, his smug smile faltering when Alexander appeared at her side. "I should thank you," Olivia said with genuine warmth that confused him. "Your cruelty led me to find something real," she added, walking away with the quiet confidence of someone who understood that sometimes life's worst moments become unexpected doorways to salvation. Olivia returned to her nursing studies, moving into Alexander's downtown apartment, where security remained tight, but increasingly less intrusive. Her classmates noticed the change in her, the quiet confidence, the occasional black car that dropped her at campus, the subtle way she carried herself. On weekends, they established rituals that bridged their worlds. Alexander, attending hospital fundraisers where Olivia networked with medical professionals, Olivia accompanying him to business dinners, where her intelligence and compassion impressed even his most skeptical associates. "You've changed me," Alexander admitted one evening as they walked along the harbor, the city lights reflecting in the water. "I always thought power came from being feared, but watching you that night at the warehouse, fearless without a weapon, showed me true strength." Olivia squeezed his hand, understanding the magnitude of his transformation. "You were already changing," she countered. "I just gave you permission to become the man you wanted to be." Their footsteps synchronized naturally as they continued along the waterfront. 6 months to the day after their first meeting, Alexander brought Olivia back to the restaurant where it all began. The same table awaited them, this time with a small velvet box beside her water glass rather than an unwanted plate of charity. "I thought my life had to be lived in shadows," he said, taking her hand across the table, "until a woman too dignified to cry over a cruel date showed me what real courage looks like." His voice remained steady, but vulnerability shone in his eyes. Olivia's fingers trembled as she opened the box, revealing not just a ring, but a key attached to a small deed, documentation for a medical clinic in her name, funded to serve those who couldn't afford care. "This is who we are together," Alexander said simply. "Not my past or your fear, but what we build from here. From abandonment to belonging, from a stranger's unexpected kindness to a love that transformed 2 lives." The journey completed its circle in the very spot where Olivia once sat alone with just enough bus fare to get home. As she whispered yes, Alexander finally allowed himself to believe that redemption wasn't just possible. It was already his. Thank you all for following this story to its conclusion. If you enjoyed it, please let us know in the comments where you're watching from. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this video with others who might appreciate it. Your support makes it possible for us to continue bringing these emotional journeys to life.